The days of Noah have arrived, but they'll be vastly different than we expect. Have the days of Noah begun? Jesus said his return would be like the days of Noah. So are we living through the early stages of those days right now? And if so, what should we be prepared for? What should we be doing right now? I bet those questions have you scratching your head. What should we be looking for and what should we be doing? That's what we're talking about today in this video. Now, a misunderstood notion by many in the church is that, the days of Noah are something the church avoids. But if we look at Jesus' analogy, comparing his return to the days of Noah, those days come before any rapture, before any rescue. The church doesn't avoid them. In the analogy, Noah and his family are the church. They're the symbols of the church, lifted above the wrath of God poured out on the world below him. Like it says in the prophetic Psalm 47, he will subdue the peoples under us and the nations under our feet. Psalm 47:3. What does this mean other than we are physically above the nations in the clouds or in heaven while Jesus subdues the nations with his wrath? So the flood is a good analogy for the wrath, and the ark is a good analogy for the rapture that rescues the church from the flood of wrath that's coming. Now, if that's true, and I think it is, then the days of Noah are those days before any rapture, whatever rapture theory you believe in, pre, mid, pre-wrath, or post. It doesn't matter. In each instance, the days of Noah begin before the rapture and end when the ark touches down on Mount Ararat. Now that we have that understanding of the symbols, let's read Jesus' account of the days of Noah. Jesus related this analogy on at least 2 occasions. Once on the Mount of Olives, just a day or 2 before his betrayal and crucifixion. We call that version part of the Olivet Discourse. There is also an earlier version that Jesus told his disciples in Luke 17. He told this account as he and his disciples were traveling to Jerusalem. So it was a week or 2 earlier than the more famous telling in the Olivet Discourse. If Jesus told this account twice, he might have told it a dozen times. We don't know. But it was a main analogy of his to explain his return and the rescue of believers. So let's give it a listen. As it was in the days of Noah, so it will also be in the days of the Son of Man. They ate, they drank, they married wives, they were given in marriage, until the day that Noah entered the ark, and the flood came and destroyed them all. Likewise, it was also in the days of Lot. They ate, they drank, they bought, they sold, they planted, they built. But on the day that Lot went out of Sodom, it rained fire and brimstone from heaven and destroyed them all. Even so, it will be in the day when the Son of Man is revealed. Luke 17:26-30. Today we're going to take this apart and see what the days of Noah were all about and what we should be looking for and doing about it. Because knowing doesn't mean a thing if you aren't applying what you learn. The first thing I bet you noticed is that Jesus gave us 2 analogies about the same period, the days of Noah and the days of Lot. Both the account of Noah and the account of Lot are about the days before the rescue of the church, and both have the same main point. The unsaved will be going about their everyday lives without a clue that Jesus is about to come back and that their world is about to be destroyed. But the righteous will be saved from that wrath. This is the main point, and a lot of pastors and teachers think that is the only point of the analogy. Don't take it too far, I hear many of them say. Well, if it's the only point, why did Jesus give us 2 analogies? I mean, back to back. And why did he give this lesson as a parable of sorts rather than just plainly saying his message? My return is going to surprise the whole world. Don't get caught off guard. But he didn't do that, did he? No, he referenced 2 very specific Old Testament accounts, Noah and Lot. So there must be more to the analogies than what most scholars seem to think. Why did Jesus give them to us in this fashion then? I would say probably so we would dig into our Bibles and study the accounts of Noah and Lot and discover what the last days will be like for ourselves. Next, Jesus gave us several parallels between the analogies. I don't know if you noticed that. In both accounts, a disaster comes that, quote, destroyed them all. That phrase, destroyed them all, is in both. And so is the phrase, until the day and on the day when Noah and Lot were rescued. So, if Jesus repeats these ideas in both parallel accounts, we should take notice. Jesus is reinforcing the idea that on the very day the church is rescued, the destruction of the wicked comes in the form of fire and brimstone. Second, Jesus tells us that the same day is the day he is revealed to the world. In other words, it's the day every eye sees him. Look at how much information we gather just from these couple verses. There is one other phrase that's the same, eating and drinking. These are the basic functions of life, but the basics are contrasted with some other things. Marriage in the Noah account and economic matters in the Lot account. Buying and selling, planting and building, you heard it. To understand these, we have to go back to the original accounts in Genesis. Now, where is marriage found? In the Noah account in Genesis, at the very beginning of Noah's account. Now it came to pass, when men began to multiply on the face of the earth, and daughters were born to them, that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were beautiful, and they took wives for themselves of all whom they chose. Genesis 6, 1 through 2. Those who say the days of Noah aren't about the Nephilim don't follow the breadcrumbs of clues Jesus put in the Luke account. The marriage reference is there to take us back to Genesis and the sons of God and the birth of a Nephilim. There were giants, and the Greek word translated here as giants means hybrids, on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men and they bore children to them. Those were mighty men who were of old, men of renown. Genesis 6:4. God had created mankind in his image, but genetic hybrids, known as Nephilim, were born in the days of Noah. They corrupted that image of God. But the Bible says this about Noah himself. Noah was a just man, perfect in his generations. Noah walked with God. Genesis 6:9. Perfect in his generations is an unusual phrase that says that Noah's genome or DNA was not corrupted as many others were. Now, just 10 years ago, every major Christian prophecy teacher scoffed at the idea of the return of the so-called Nephilim in the end times. However, creating a new human species is now the focus of the global elites who want to further, quote, human evolution, as they call it. Since Jesus came to save humans and not hybrids, the goal of the elites is to create a race of unredeemable, unsavable, so-called people. So one thing to keep your eye on, to look out for, and to avoid at all costs is being sucked into this concept that you can perfect yourself with science through changing your DNA. We are God's image. You can't perfect perfection. God's image is perfection. In the Lot account, economics was featured, buying and selling, planting and building. And economics is why Lot chose to live there in the first place. And Lot lifted his eyes and saw the plain of the Jordan, that it was well watered everywhere, before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, like the garden of the Lord, and this means the Garden of Eden, like the land of Egypt as you go toward Zoar. Then Lot chose for himself all the plain of the Jordan, and Lot journeyed east. And they, Abraham and Lot, separated from each other. Abraham dwelt in the land of Canaan, and Lot dwelt in the cities of the plain, and pitched his tent even as far as Sodom. But the men of Sodom were exceedingly wicked and sinful against the Lord. Genesis 13:10 through 13. So the second takeaway from this account is not to get suckered into the materialism of our age and become complicit with the sinful patterns of unbelievers who run the system. In the Lot account, as Lot's wife was being rescued on the day of Sodom's destruction, she looked back. She turned around and famously was turned into a pillar of salt. Jesus warned us all, remember Lot's wife. Remember that she was drawn back into the materialistic city and perished because of that. Jesus wants us to come out of her, my people, not to value what they do. And did you notice buying and selling was part of what the people in Sodom were doing right up until the day of their destruction? What does the Bible tell us will happen to buying and selling in the last days? Well, it's going to be taken away by the mark of the beast. We need to be prepared for a day when this system isn't available to us anymore, whether we see the mark of the beast or not. Are you putting away food for those days right now? Jesus also expected us to realize other aspects of those accounts not mentioned in his analogies. About the days of Noah, the Bible says, "Then the Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every intent of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually." Genesis 6:5. And we're probably all in agreement that the world is kind of getting to that point. So great violence and wickedness are coming if the days of Noah are a prelude to what we will experience in the future. Are you prepared for this? To endure violence? Did Noah fight back against the violence? No. He built an ark instead. He prepared a way for him and as many who would listen and could be saved to be saved from the coming flood. That is exactly what God expects of you and me to do, to build an ark. That is what Last Days Overcomers, my ministry, is trying to do, holding conferences throughout the USA to prepare churches for what is coming. One key thing to prepare for is what happened to God's faithful before the flood. Why did only 8 people enter the ark? One reason is that many didn't survive that time. Noah's grandfather was named Methuselah, meaning when he dies, judgment. And the very year he died was the year of the flood. Well, that was his grandfather. What about Noah's dad, Lamech? He died 5 years before the flood. So both men were alive to see Noah begin to build the ark. But how did they die? Methuselah was the oldest man who ever lived. But what about Noah's dad, Lamech? He was hundreds of years younger than Noah or Methuselah when he died. Is it possible that he died from the violence that had come upon the world? Now, we have to speculate here because the Bible doesn't tell us. Certainly, the violence took the lives of many. However, wars must have been rampant as man's sinful nature had swayed. We can assume that the violence was directed toward believers most of all. So perhaps Lamech and Methuselah were martyrs. Noah was a preacher of righteousness. Maybe he had many converts over the years, and the only ones left were the 8 that were mentioned in the Bible who got into the ark. Again, this is just speculation, but could Methuselah have been the final martyr? And when he was killed, God's patience was over to preserve mankind, and in particular, Eve's lineage that would eventually lead to the Messiah. God's justice had to finally be unleashed. Now, we have no idea what exactly happened during the last week as Noah was loading the ark with animals. Was there some kind of attack on his community of believers? And did Noah and his family escape with their very lives, just as God closed the door of the ark? We have to ask, will the rapture be just like that? Christians often assume that millions of living believers will be raptured into God's presence along with the dead from all the ages. But what if that is not correct? What if a massive persecution takes the lives of most believers right before the rapture? Jesus asked, when the Son of Man comes, will he really find faith on the earth? To me, that doesn't sound like millions of people left, does it? It sounds much more like the days of Noah, where only a handful are living at the time of the rescue or rapture. Now, if this is true, all of us, regardless of what end-time rapture theory we believe in, must begin to prepare for persecution, imprisonment, maybe even martyrdom. Are you ready for something like that? Are we ready to resist the temptation to fall away at the last minute before the rapture when we're faced with that type of persecution? Jesus said, "Remember Lot's wife." He said that for a reason. He said it to Christians. Click right here to keep watching and discover why Jesus gave believers that warning and what our churches should be teaching now that the hour is getting late. Till then, this is Nelson, and I'll see you there.